Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. Except you probably have heard of what we're talking about today. Let's back up a bit. Do you remember that really bad American Godzilla movie TriStar released back in 1998?
I'm sure you do remember. It was a reimagining of the series that completely missed the point and prompted Toho to rush a movie of their own into production. The result was Godzilla 2000, the only film of what would become the Millennium series to be released theatrically in America.
Rather than a traditional review, I'm going to make a controversial statement. Well, controversial for a Godzilla fan at least. I believe Godzilla 2000 is a pure Godzilla movie. It is the closest thing we've got to a single film that encompasses everything that makes this franchise. And I'm going to spend the rest of this video explaining exactly why I believe that.
First of all, I will admit that Godzilla 2000 is obviously a rush job, pushed into production before it could be refined and polished. Yet not only is it still a superior G film to the '98 movie, it's actually far better than a rush job has any right to be.
Still, when taken as part of the greater franchise, it's not exactly amazing.
It lacks the gravitas of the original, the epic scope of GMK or the 2014 film, or the intricacies of Godzilla vs. Biollante. At the same time, it lacks the laziness of Godzilla's Revenge, the unlikable characters of Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, and the surreal weirdness of Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Most fans would call it a completely average movie, neither great nor awful. Yet, somewhat paradoxically, it is in this averageness that Godzilla 2000 shines and becomes the embodiment of all things Godzilla.
How does it accomplish this, you ask? The answer is simple. No, really, that's it. Godzilla 2000 works because it is simple.
I have always believed that simplicity is not inherently inferior to complexity in storytelling. Both can be done correctly or incorrectly. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah we already covered. That went for a complex plot, it failed miserably. The original Godzilla, meanwhile, has a complex story involving secrets, a love triangle, political commentary, post-war recovery, the responsibility of the scientific community, and the horrors of a nuclear holocaust, and all of these elements come together beautifully in the finished film.
At the same time, though, there's something to be said for movies that are straightforward, cutting through the crap to get down to business. And Godzilla 2000 fits the bill.
The plot is very straightforward. We follow Godzilla Prediction Network, or GPN, founder Yuji Shinoda, his daughter Io, and reporter Yuki Ichinose as they attempt to track Godzilla's movements across Japan. Meanwhile, the Crisis Control Institute, or CCI, is attempting to raise a meteorite from the bottom of the sea, believing it to be a potential new source of energy. This operation is personally overseen by the ruthless founder of the CCI, Mitsuo Katagiri, and his lackey Shiro Miyasaka. However, the meteorite turns out to be a massive alien spaceship which has been dormant for millions of years and has now reawakened. It attracts the attention of Godzilla and swipes his genetic material, eventually turning the ship's occupant into Orga, a beast which can survive on Earth and intends to take over. If it can get past Godzilla, of course.
See? Nothing complicated about that. The plot is very straightforward, which makes it easy to follow. In fact, Godzilla 2000 is the only entry in the Millennium series without any continuity ties, so you can pick it up without needing to worry about all sorts of backstory in movies that came prior. Do I dare say that Godzilla 2000 is a good first film for new fans? Yes. Yes, I do dare.
This simplicity extends to the human cast.
The common perception people have about fiction is that the more complex a character is, the better. But that's not always true. Sometimes simpler characters are easier to understand right away. We get them quicker. And such is the case here.
Yuji is a scientific idealist raising a daughter by himself. Io is a little girl who had to become the lady of the house early due to her mother's absence. Yuki is a frustrated reporter trying to get a good scoop. Katagiri is a ruthless man who places his job above everything else, even the well-being of others. Miyasaka is a Japanese Waylon Smithers. They even kind of look the same now that I think of it.
Alright, fine. They're archetypes. I'll give you that. On their own, there's not much to them. But when you put those archetypes together and watch them bounce off each other, that's when they really become interesting.
Katagiri is a cold-hearted man compared to Yuji, and their respective views automatically put them at odds with each other, but they're ultimately both doing what they believe to be right given the circumstances. Yuki is just trying to do a thankless job at first, but unexpectedly winds up bonding with Yuji and Io. Miyasaka winds up feeling torn between his loyalty to Katagiri and his friendship with Yuji. Really, we know everything we need to know about these characters, and their interactions are easy to follow and get invested in.
Would it have been nice to know things like what happened to Io's mother, or why Katagiri and Yuji hate each other so much? Sure it would have, but the movie doesn't suffer from not including these parts.
So in many ways, the plot and characters are reminiscent of the early to mid Showa era films, being just interesting enough to hold our interest, but knowing when to step aside when the monsters show up.
Speaking of which, what about the monsters? I have yet to talk about them, and my coverage of the Godzilla anime film has made it very clear that I put a lot of importance on how they're portrayed. Well, their portrayal in Godzilla 2000 serves to reinforce my point, that this movie embodies the essence of the series.
Let's start with Orga. Just as the movie is what you might picture when imagining a typical G-film, so Orga is what you might picture when imagining a typical G-film villain. He's an invader from space who looks just alien enough to be weird and has a cool set of powers.
He's also got a unique personality. Orga could have just been a giant monster that says roar and smashes stuff, but instead, he's a character.
When he first appears after having transformed from this weird chrome squid, he doesn't just go straight for the attack, he takes a moment to check himself out, see what his new form looks like. Deciding he likes what he sees, he then makes it his priority to steal all of Godzilla's DNA and become a second Godzilla, but he's so single-minded in this pursuit that it becomes his undoing. Orga is on par with the human cast in being mostly simple, but still more complex than you might expect. And to top it all off, he's got a neat, instantly recognizable design. True, a striking silhouette isn't the most important thing for a giant monster. Heck, King Kong is oftentimes just a giant gorilla, but it does help, and Orga has a design that works.
But this is Godzilla's movie when all is said and done, and this particular portrayal of Godzilla embodies his three most prominent roles.
Over the decades, Godzilla has been a hero, a villain, and a neutral force of nature, and in Godzilla 2000, he embodies all three roles. Before the UFO shows up, he's treated as an antagonist by the CCI and a neutral force of nature by the GPN. For the finale, he becomes the hero. Well, maybe anti-hero is the more accurate term, but he's clearly the one to root for.
These three elements work together in the film and feel like they naturally fit rather than be disjointed.
The plot doesn't just say, he's the bad guy and now suddenly he's the good guy because we said so. Rather, it presents a scenario where Godzilla is after Orga to settle a score, and his victory just happens to benefit mankind. Again, not the most nuanced scenario ever, but it works.
I also have to say, this is one of my favorite Godzilla designs. It's got a nice ferocity to it, not to mention cool features like the alligator head, the rough hide, and the flame-shaped spikes tipped with magenta. Fun fact, this was actually the first time Godzilla appeared in a live-action film with a green skin. Up until that point, he'd always been charcoal gray.
There are plenty of other neat things in here too. The idea of the GPN basically being storm chasers for kaiju is a neat one I'd like to see brought back at some point. The special effects are predominantly good. Not every shot works, as you can see for yourselves, but those that do look great. Naturally, the action set pieces are very satisfying. Pretty much the last quarter of the film is devoted entirely to Godzilla fighting Orga and the UFO until practically when the credits roll.
Also, if you can believe it, this is one of the few times where the American cut of the film is better than the Japanese cut, because it makes a few edits to improve the pacing and does a better job with the sound mix.
Even the English dub is surprisingly well acted, and contains funny quotes that add a nice sense of levity to the proceedings.
I guarantee it'll go through Godzilla like crap through a goose.
Don't just stand there! Move the boat!
Gott in Himmel!
Great Caesar's ghost!
So in the end, Godzilla 2000 is one of my favorite films of the whole series, simply because it delivers everything you could possibly want from a Godzilla movie.
Sure, there are other G-flicks which go the extra mile and surpass our expectations, either presenting us with thought-provoking meditations on the world, or stunning us with amazing visuals, and these are undeniably great movies. Sometimes, though, you just want to watch something fun, something that gives you a break from the daily grind. In other words, sometimes you'd just rather watch a cartoon than a drama, and Godzilla 2000 fits the bill.
I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of nostalgia involved here, since this was the first proper Godzilla movie I ever saw in theaters, not to mention the first DVD I ever owned. But as far as I'm concerned, Godzilla 2000 deserves a lot of respect from the fans for reveling in all of the stuff that makes Kaiju Eiga great. That's my 2 cents at least. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. Yeah, that's right. Godzilla 2000 got a widespread theatrical release in America, and not just a 1-week limited run in only a couple of states nowhere near where I live, Funimation. I'm slightly bitter about that.